Thank you. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Very excited to be here. My name is Dulisha Kulasurya. I am a partner with Deloitte and with a little small boutique group called Center for the Edge. And I'll introduce the center a little bit more. Until very recently, I was in the US. I actually got here a few months before COVID. So it's been a bit of a lockdown, but it's been an exciting time to be here and to watch this region actually emerge faster than the others. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm really excited to have us here. I'm going to share my screen now, the sense of what to expect for the day. Let's go here and go to full screen. Good. So welcome again. We want to talk about the edges of Southeast Asia. And the reason we call these edges, because that's what's emerging in the region. And this is a partnership between three institutions, Deloitte, the US ASEAN Business Council, and the Singapore Economic Development Board. And this is our official launch of this initiative. It's been about a year in the working, a bit slow during these times. We're very excited. So here's what to expect. We have about an hour to spend with you, and in that hour, I'll have some opening remarks to set the stage, to set some context for why we're here and what we're talking about. And then we get to the main course, the discussion with our panelists. And we have an extremely exciting set of panelists, leaders from all three organizations joining in, and they've been part of this effort as well. And then we want to hear from you. So we'll do a Q&A, and we'll close with a call to action to have you all join us in accelerating this work and accelerating this region to come out of the pandemic. So with that, let's get started. I want to spend a few minutes introducing who we are and why we're doing this. Now, to start off with, the Center for the Edge. We've been in the US for about a dozen years now, 12 years. And last year, I moved here to Singapore to set one up for Asia Pacific. And a couple of things to mention here. If you were to ask my colleagues what drives their behavior, we're all professionals, they would say it's whatever keeps your clients up at night. And what the center does a little bit different. Our mandate is slightly different. Our mandate is what should be keeping you up at night and how we bring that to the table. So what we do is we look ahead, we frame the world in a way that's understandable, and we bring that forward and say, given that, what do you do today? And the reason we have termed ourselves Center for the Edge is because we believe that all disruptions emerge from an edge. That could be the edge of technology, the edge of markets, edge of geographies like ASEAN is, or edge of demographics. And the reason we term this initiative Edges of Southeast Asia is we want to apply our thinking to Southeast Asia and see what's emerging on the edge, what's exciting, what's new. And there's so much more. And what we want to showcase, starting with this, and this is only the beginning, it's what's so vibrant about this region that is unseen. There's so many stereotypes. We want to break those stereotypes. We want to look ahead and say, we want you to see with new eyes what is so vibrant and energetic about this region. So to start off with, here's what we're launching. We have this beautiful pack and a microsite built by EDB. And in that, we have 25 cases that are being showcased. There are a couple of essays that started off. And among these cases, we've actually highlighted all different parts of the region, from Singapore to Myanmar to Cambodia and Indonesia, with examples like Warung Pinta. Warung Pinta is the future of digital mom and pop retail. We see all these warungs and saris all over the region. What does that look like when it's digital? So the front of each card gives a case, the back of it gives you much more information about why it matters. Grab and Gojek, our favorite superstars of the region. And if you heard the news this weekend, it looks like they might be coming together, becoming even a bigger powerhouse of the region. So that's a big part of how this region will change. But we also have examples like Anurag Seruthai, second generation fisherman selling stuff on a Facebook platform, m-commerce. Like how we communicate, how we connect, how we sell is fundamentally different. This region has a lot going on the mobile side. We have topics like the global halal database. How do you blend old with new? How do you blend what is endemic to this region or how this region runs with technology? We have examples like Tay Food from Vietnam, which is a blockchain based supply chain around security and safety and tracking, big topics, again, old and new. And we also have examples like Compot pepper. Why would you have Compot pepper? Well, Compot pepper got geographic indication status. It's kind of like Champagne can only be from the region of Champagne. Well, Compot pepper can only be from that region in Cambodia. And when you get that status, that fundamentally changes the economics of what you can gain for your product from being a commodity to being a specialty. And we have examples like EcoSpirits, Singaporean-based company fundamentally rethinking the whole supply chain around liquor and bottling. So we had 25 of these cases that allow you to see this region very differently. How would you go about collating all these different pieces together, and what would you do with this information? So I think to kick us off, to think a little bit more thematically about these topics, about these different cases, we pulled together four different themes that can help us for today. Right. So what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is just introduce these themes a little bit more, so you have a sense of what we could go into, and then we'll talk to the panelists and say which of these themes relate to them most or appeal to them most, and where would we go from here. Okay. So the first one is a digital edge. We all know that this region will be leading in digital in many ways. We have 90% of the roughly 360 million internet users in the region access web primarily from their phones. So in terms of M commerce, M anything, this region is going to lead. And that's coupled with the rapid digitalization of various industries like banking, healthcare, commerce, education. Now, it's not like the other regions are not on the same pathway. So the big difference is this region may have less infrastructure bias than the others. So it allows you to leapfrog in a way that the others haven't. While the others are trying to change incumbent infrastructures, while they're battling the incumbents to find dominance, this region can step ahead. So we have examples like HaloDoc that's providing medical care and checkups online. We have examples like ZaloPay from Vietnam that is, mobile finance. We have Grab and Gojek, we have our own Pinta, lots of digital examples here. So we become a high-tech developing economy. A big, big topic here. Another topic here, ASEAN middle class. Everyone talks about the ASEAN middle class, and that's because the numbers are big. 50 million new consumers will join the ranks by 2022 to add to a $300 billion middle class. That's going to be a big, big consuming class over here. But will they look different? There's this concept of globalization, where global and local come in. Yes, they are going to be the middle class population that's emerging from Southeast Asia are very connected to global trends, but they also honor and they like what they have here as well. So you're going to see a mix of global and local, where local tastes come in with global mindsets. And we are right in the middle between China and the US and Europe. So which of these will emerge? Which of these will rise to the top? What will drive the burgeoning consumer class here? How will it look different? Big questions here on the middle class. Let me get to cities. Lovable cities, green cities. Cities are growing faster here. If you look at the growth of the next generation of cities, it will be in Asia, it'll be in Africa, it'll be in Southeast Asia. And these are already big, they're getting bigger, they're getting to be more and more sustainable. We showcased BSD City in Indonesia. In their last phase, it's going to be completely green. However, beyond being green, they're also looking to be much more human, to be more inclusive. Can they do that? Can they reduce the disparities we have today? One of the other projects we're working on with the Singapore government, with Design Singapore Council, is how to move Singapore from a livable to a lovable city. That lovable aspect is going to come back in all parts of it. Now, most people consider Southeast Asians very warm. We want to make sure that continues. So how would we create green and lovable cities in the future? And then the last topic, which nobody can ignore, is the great jobs challenge. How can we afford to employ the generations to come in this region. And I think part of the mindset shift here is to go from employment to income and wealth. It's actually not just about employment. What we need to do is provide much more opportunities for entrepreneurship. But what will that look like? Is that going to come from MOEs and SOEs, MNCs and SOEs? Or is it going to come from more and more smaller startups? Are the startups going to be the new age startups or are they going to be the old age? What's the mix going to be? So there's a lot going on in here around jobs and what can happen. And these are the topics I want to launch the panel with. But before I get to the panel, I want to introduce our exclusive opening with all of you who are joining today. If you click on that QR code, you can go to the microsite built by EDB that showcases the 25 cases, that shows the essays. You can also contact us at Deloitte Southeast Asia at Deloitte.com, and with any questions you have, and I can respond to that. And also, as we go along this session, there will be a QR code somewhere along the way. I'm not seeing it on my screen, that you can send any questions, and I will receive the questions on my phone, and I can respond to them when you get to the Q&A session. So welcome again. Great to have you on, and let's jump into our panel. So we have an incredible set of panelists today. I was going to show a last slide introducing all of us, but in our panel is our CEO of Deloitte Asia Pacific, Cindy Hook. It's Managing Director of the Singapore Economic Development Board, EDB, Kai Fong, or KAIF, and the Regional Director of the US ASEAN Business Council, Ambassador Michael Mihalik. Amazing people, all three representing the three institutions that we've been working to build this out. And I have an opening question for each of you, and we'll start with you, Ambassador Mihalik, if that's okay, to talk about, I walked through 4 themes, right? From the digital edge to the middle class to cities and the jobs. Which of these themes are you most keen on? What really gets you energized, both for yourself personally and as an institution? But as you do that, could you also introduce yourself a little bit more and give us some context where you're coming from?
Sure thing. Thank you very much, Delisha. And good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here and glad for the opportunity to participate in this Edges of Southeast Asia. I am the Senior Vice President and Regional Managing Director of the US ASEAN Business Council. We are a trade association that's been operating in ASEAN for 37 years. And our main business is to help American companies do business in Southeast Asia and to help Southeast Asia understand more about the United States and make connections with companies in the United States. One of the main reasons that we're very interested in this particular project is because you'll find out that many of the companies that are in the US ASEAN Business Council are within the Fortune 250 largest companies in the United States. They are big, they are digital, and they are innovative. And they're picking up right now on all of the innovation and all of the new things that are coming out of Southeast Asia, which is one of the most exciting areas in the world. And particularly from the point of view of innovation. Within the council, we've just set up an innovation subcommittee within our ASEAN committee, which is looking at innovation of all types. And if you look at some of the companies that are in these packets that Delisha was talking about, you'll see that you've got some fantastic innovators. And I think some of the ones that are really exciting are ones that are not sort of the traditional blockchain or the traditional Gojek and Grab, but it's more like VidD, a video company in Bangkok that has offered opportunities for local filmmakers to do films that they can be distributed all over the world and all over Asia. It's Mimpikita, one of the companies that is starting out by doing fashion, which is modest fashion, which is speaking to not only, or which started out by speaking only to many of the Muslim population, which is huge here in Southeast Asia, but more and more Because of the internet, because of the connections that they've made, they're igniting interest in this kind of fashion all over the world. Some of the largest fashion distributors or the fashion events in the world are beginning to have women who are walking around in the modest fashion that Mimpakita represents. 88 Rising is another one. We're going through a tradition of music. They are putting Southeast Asia on the map with, I forgot the name of that one, song, which is
Right.
Slow Dancing in the Dark.
Yep.
A huge thing, which everybody loves. I'll have to listen to it someday. but the main idea here is that they're putting Southeast Asia on the map. They're getting these kinds of brilliant innovations, and this is what is exciting our companies, because it's not just the product. You can look at Warung Pintar, which is back in the old days, you used to have internet in the box. Well, this is a sari in the box, where you can get a box which has got all of the connections that you need to plug it into your mobile phone and into your laptop, and you're set up with business plans, you're set up with inventory software, you're set up with connections to other platforms around the area that connects you to your own locality, but also the wider world around you. So this is what Southeast Asia is doing now. They're getting more and more excited about innovation. They're looking at blockchain. They're using blockchains in wonderful ways. You heard about the halal database. And as you know, halal is coming into regulatory regimes, and there are many different types of halal. So having one place in a trusted fashion, which is the beauty of blockchain, that is, it is a trusted ledger system that makes sure that what is on it is not fake news, but is real news that's been verified many different times. You can find what is the halal recommendation or what is the halal regulation, whether you're going into Indonesia or Brunei or Malaysia or any of the other countries around the world where halal is important for the Muslim population within that country. You heard about TE food, which is another great idea. People have often talked about buying local. In fact, one of our companies, Visa, has got a great campaign out now about shopping local. Well, how do you know that product on the map on the web is local? It's got a little barcode on it, or it's got a little QR code on it. You click on that, and again, through a blockchain, it takes you all the way back in the production line, right back to the farm from where that food may have come from, or the handicraft store from which that batik came from. So these are kind of the things that are exciting for our companies, because not only are they exciting because of the products that they're inventing, but it's exciting because of the processes that they're inventing, the way in which they're taking diversity, which is a hallmark of Southeast Asia, and making it a part of their business plan and making it a part of what they are selling to their own localities. And our companies are interested in working with them to make them go global, to take them from the edge of Southeast Asia to the farthest edges of the whole world. I mean, these companies are not only doing the kind of research that I've talked about, but they're also doing research in some serious things, like the way I talked about the application of the blockchain. Well, they're out there in terms of gaming as well. Free Fire is a real popular game, which I think everybody is excited about. But you can use those kinds of controls. You can use that kind of strategies for a lot more than just video games. So many of our companies, in fact, companies all over the world, which used to spend a lot more money on R&D than they are now, are also spending some of that R&D money on looking around for startups. Because if the startup's already done the research, why not partner with the startup and buy the technology and utilize it and help them to develop their technology and into a win-win situation for your MNC and for the startup. And Southeast Asia is the hotbed of that kind of innovation. So you see, that's one of the reasons that I'm excited about this project. And I'm excited about all of the different companies that we've talked about here. And another one is, which is I find really exciting, which is even more important for the future, is the smart cities. In smart cities, Dulisha already mentioned the BSD city, but what he didn't mention about the smart cities is some of the other ones, like Chulalongkorn Centennial Park. And not only that, but look at Singapore, the entire city of Singapore. We're talking about an area of the world which is inundated every year during the monsoon season with huge amounts of rain and causing huge amounts of flooding. Well, Chulalongkorn Centenary Park is designed after King Rama IX actually saw a certain monkey, which has a very funny way of putting food into its mouth, into its little cheek pouches, and saving that food to eat for a later day. And this gave him the idea, why can't we store water somewhere in a place where it's going to be beautiful and it will look pretty? And then later on in the dry months, we can take that water and we can use it for our people. And so this Centennial Park is built that way. Singapore, the entire freeway system and many of the river systems within Singapore are built as water management systems. So they look beautiful. And these days, they're talking about some of the river systems, and they show the pictures of these most adorable river otters you've ever seen. But more than that, this is a flood control system that's going to save lives in the event of huge inundating floods. More than that, this parts of Southeast Asia are sinking. And so these cities that are coming up, these cities that are taking advantage of the diversity of the people, are also looking ahead to climate change, looking ahead to sustainability. And they're making use of those principles to build cities that are going to withstand climate change, that are going to be prepared for sinking. I was quite amazed. Some of these places are sinking at more than 10 centimeters a year. So I think I've talked way too long as it is. So let me turn the screen back to Dulisha, because we've got two other amazing speakers that I know you're going to want to hear from. Dulisha, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador. Yeah, you did cover a lot of ground, from digital edges to sustainable cities, and it seems a lot of this is exciting. And to give you more context, Ambassador Michalik has been in the region for over 3 decades and was a U.S. ambassador for APAC as well as for Vietnam. So Cindy, on to you on the same topic of like which of these themes are interesting, exciting to you, and more context to yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Delisha, and thank you also both Kai Fong and the EDB and Ambassador McCulloch. It's been great to work with both of your organizations on this important work. I am the CEO of Deloitte Asia Pacific. Deloitte's the largest professional services firm in the world. We have over 60,000 professionals in Asia across 19 geographies. And you may know Deloitte from our heritage as an audit and tax business, and we continue to do that great work. But the fastest growing part of our firm is about consulting and helping clients to transform their businesses enabled by technology. And so that's where our interest in this project comes in. And while our clients are largely corporations, multinationals and local corporations, as well as businesses and state-owned enterprises, and we also serve family businesses. And you might say, why is Deloitte interested in the edges? And the reason for that is we believe, as Delisha said, that innovation often happens around the edges in smaller, unexpected places where you have the ability to test and try things that then can be applicable to bigger enterprises. The other comment that I would make is that more and more solutions to the world's most complex problems, whether business problems or government problems, aren't solved by any one organization. They're solved by alliances and bringing together within an ecosystem groups to solve them. So that's what's exciting to us about this edge innovation. Now, when I looked at the 25 case studies, they were super compelling. And I realized that this is just 25 of what would be hundreds or thousands of examples of innovation that's happening around Asia. And I'll highlight two themes that came through these 25 cases. All of them had one of two elements. Either they were digitally enabled and just showing that from the smallest businesses, digital technology is being used to scale and grow and transform business models. And the second theme that came through was sustainability and businesses using technologies to be more sustainable. And Michael gave many examples of that. So I think that's really encouraging to see. So those would be my opening comments, Alicia.
Thank you, Cindy. And Cindy relocated from Australia to Singapore recently as she took on the role to lead Asia. So she's also very keen on growing more in the region and helping the region. Kaif, on to you. So you are the local, you are the representative for Singapore and Southeast Asia among all of us. What's new here? What excites you about these teams?
Well, Delisha, thanks for having us on this webinar. And my name's Kai Fong Cheng. Just call me Kai. And I'm the managing director of the Singapore Economic Development Board, which is an agency that's responsible for investments into Singapore. But really, when you're investing in Singapore, you don't invest just for 5-6 million people. You invest to tap on the potential of what Ambassador Mihalik talked about, which is 670 million people. And I'm really glad that Delisha and team actually pulled these edges of Southeast Asia together to give people more color and texture. And I think Ambassador himself and Cindy also talked about the kind of opportunities and the innovative stuff that you see in this region. And I hope I hope that changes your whole view about Southeast Asia, because I realize that for those who haven't experienced Southeast Asia, perhaps the only experience that you might have is eat, pray, love in Bali. I mean, well, Bali is great and all that, but Southeast Asia is much more colorful and much more vibrant. In fact, when I travel, I love vibrant and growing, fast growth cities. I mean, there's cities where you travel to and nothing ever changes 20 years later as a student versus when you come back, maybe one or two buildings in the region. But if you come to this region, you'll find many vibrant cities, buildings propping up maybe overnight sometimes. And I just have 4 measures of it, right? 1, how bad the traffic jams are, and trust me, things can get quite bad. 2, how buzzing the nightlife is, whether there are night markets, whether there's just a hustle and bustle even at 12 a.m. The honking of horns, right, at 12 a.m. at night. 3, how crowded the flights are. I know this is COVID, but even during the COVID period where there are travel restrictions and worries about the spread of COVID, I think the flights are still going on, and that's a good sign. And 4th, how many hipster coffee joints there are, right? Yes, I know in America we all love Starbucks and all that, but really, and I'm not talking about Blue Bottle, but the amount of third wave coffee roasters, people roasting their own beans, people are trying to figure out the provenance of coffee on different street corners. And the more you have, I think it signifies the growth, which brings me to my theme. Sorry, I was meandering there, but the growth of that ASEAN middle class, which I think we are right now at the cusp of growth, and this is a great time to come. Let me just explain why, right? If you think about it, just this year alone, I think it's accelerated the amount of people coming online in Southeast Asia. You have 40 million just added who have accessed internet for the first time. And that's a significant number if you think about it. And we have about 400 million people going online. And with the growth of cheaper handsets, I mean, look at Google, right? They set up a unit in Singapore called the Next Billion Users Division. And the idea behind that is to develop applications for the next billion of users, many of which are going to come from this region. And it just shows you the explosive growth that's coming. If you look at e-commerce growth, it's just exploded. This year, we're on track to do 100 billion worth of GMV. And in 5 years' time, 300 billion. And if you track the trajectory of e-commerce growth, this really, and you think first it started in the US, then even in China with Alibaba. What took Alibaba 10 years, I think will take this region probably 5 to 6 years, because we're just moving at such a fast pace, and there's already a well-trodden path. If you look at what people, fintech growth, that's usually the first to take off after, simply because, mundane as it sounds, right? Access to capital, access for both consumers as well as companies, that's the primary bottleneck that limits the growth, that limits the expansion of businesses. And fintech is growing. And if you look at the three things that people are borrowing money to buy, and these are things that give people more potential, increase their potential to grow, right? So 1, education. 2, motorcycles for transport. And 3, handphones to stay connected to people. And all three are booming. And I think that's why you've seen the companies that Ambassador talked about, right? Whether it's in terms of Warung Pintar, enabled by the internet, whether it's in terms of Hello Doctor, health tech, because in these countries, you don't have access to really public health, a strong public health system. But with handphones and all that, perhaps you can use internet to scale and to overcome some of the challenges. Even if the largest bank in Indonesia only have 12,000 branches, but with fintech and with just handphones, you virtually have a branch. You have millions of branches everywhere, and that's the power. And I think we are just at the cusp of the growth, which is why you should think about coming. That's my first point. Second point, I think we in Southeast Asia, it may seem pretty daunting. 10 different countries, every country has its own characteristics and quite diverse. But really, there's more in common than you think, and there's more in common with Southeast Asian markets and the markets that entrepreneurs, startups are already operating in. I mean, if you think about it, Vietnam and Indonesia, 90%. In Vietnam, for example, 90%, if you talk about fast-moving consumer goods and consumer packaged goods, 90% are sold through mom and pop stores, which is why the sari-saris in Philippines or the warungs in Indonesia are taking off. But actually, that's not that different from what you have in Guatemala, for example, or in Latin America. So I think there are already existing models where perhaps you have operations there, you have some experience there, and many of this can be combined, and you can have learnings and even reverse innovation. I mean, I always wonder, in this age of Zoom and internet, where really time zone differences don't matter as much, maybe, and connectivity doesn't matter as much, physical connectivity, perhaps companies should rethink how they're organized. Cindy's probably the expert at that, but rather than organize themselves by Asia Pac, by Europe and North America, perhaps you want to not organize yourselves by just the stages of the market, whether it's emerging markets, whether it's markets where you have less developed public infrastructure. I think there are many similarities and many things to learn from and to cross-pollinate and therefore create new business models. And finally, I would say there are a whole host of opportunities, and I'm not just talking about the unicorns, because unicorns by virtue of their valuations, $1 billion and above, I think there are just going to be a few around the world, or maybe 100, a few hundred and all that. But I would say don't just focus on the big opportunities. There are also small opportunities, and they're not that small to begin with, hundreds of millions and all that. And there are little pockets here and there, simply because this is a region that's eager to learn, eager to adopt new practices, and open to new ideas, because everyone's hungry, young, and fast-moving. I mean, I give you an example. You don't need a $1 billion exit, because often in some of these $1 billion exits, which we have a fair share, right? The founders have to, in order to grow, I mean, they have to get diluted, and they take a smaller percentage in that sense. But there are people who have grown and exited successfully, 100-odd million, owning the majority of their companies, simply because this is a place where there are, just huge opportunities in different verticals, right? I'll give you an example. In Philippines, 100 over million people, doesn't seem like a lot. You want to go for the $1 billion markets or something. But, you have a company like Coins.ph, financial services, again, providing wallet payment services and all that. They sold, or at least they sold a substantial part of their business to Gojek for about 70 million. But, the founders are happy, right? Because they found this niche in the market. They see the opportunity to grow. And frankly, they are enjoying what they do, and they are finding, and there's still a lot of room for growth along the way. And so I want to say it's not just a big, but there are many opportunities around. And, you just need to come here keep your eyes open, drink a couple of third wave coffee, and experience Southeast Asia for yourself. That's it. And we hope that at Singapore we can actually partner you in doing this. So if you come by, often people just launch them. They park themselves in Singapore and they launch themselves in the region. And I think you'll have not just lots of business opportunity, you have lots of fun exploring this very rich and diverse set of countries. That's all.
Thank you, Kai, and thank you, Ambassador and Cindy. So very good opening remarks to get us kicked off, and so much more to explore here. So we knew that we were in accelerating times even prior to the pandemic and the recession that has hit us. But as a result of it, we've had a discontinuity. And one of the things in our discussions with Cindy has been that she's talking about, like, look, there's so much opportunity that's going to get accelerated here. And she's seeing these as we look at the clients that we serve. So Cindy, how should corporations look at these edges? What should they do with this information? What more should they be doing in this region?
I think there's a lot to be learned from these edges. Kai Fong was hitting on a number of those things. It's not about looking for just the biggest, but what can you learn? And I think what we're starting to see more and more is, rather than, major corporations from the West trying to infuse their ways of doing things in Asia, you're going to see a flip where Asia is where things are being invented, where things are being scaled, and that is going to apply back into the rest of the world, into the Western world. It's interesting to watch what's happened during the pandemic. I find myself lecturing my friends and family back in the US on what they could learn from how Asia, and in particular Singapore, has handled this crisis by using technology. It's been extraordinary, the response and the way they've been able to impact both the health crisis and the economic crisis. And I think because of the way that's been handled, you are going to see Southeast Asia and Asia more broadly emerge faster and stronger from this crisis. So what can corporations do? I think it's about keeping your mind open. More and more, I think corporations are realizing they can't solve everything on their own. And when they can look to a technology or to a customer base or to a way to access a market that has been tried on the edge at a smaller scale, and find ways that they can use that to transform their own business models or do things differently, incredible. One of the things, I'll just give an example. I thought the Tay Food card on blockchain for food. More and more people around the world are looking for trust. What brands can they trust? What products can they trust? What companies can they trust? I'm saying right now that trust is at an all-time high. And if you can use this technology to validate the supply chain, to give consumers confidence on where their food came from, how was it sourced, was it done sustainably, organically, whatever that is, and then validate that. Imagine the impact on major consumer brands around the world if they could adopt a technology that was started in a very small way here in Asia. And I could go through, the other one that strikes me is HaloDoc, a company that is bringing doctors to a very dispersed population. Well, if you look in the Western world, I'll go to the US as an example, highest healthcare cost per capita pretty much anywhere in the world for not very good outcomes. Could you use something like this to get doctors and enable people to have access to the best care, even in a well-established economy? So you could go on and on and on, where the edge innovation that's happening in this region could be used and adopted in different ways around the world. So that's why I think, to Kai's point of recruiting people to Asia, having sat in Singapore for 2 years, it's amazing what you can learn and discover if you come here with an open mind, eager to learn, and not trying to impose your ways into Asia, but rather look on what you can take from Asia back into the rest of the world.
Cindy, I think that's great advice, and very insightful to say that in the past, all these large corporations, the ones we serve, look to expand to Asia, but now there's so much more they can learn from here. In COVID times, like you said, a Halo doc would be very useful in the Western world, where you shouldn't be going into a hospital unless it was critical. But for like the daily check-in or something that you need to do, if you could easily check in on your phone, that would be so much more useful. Kaif, now you've made a very impassionate plea for Southeast Asia and Singapore and the region, but you didn't talk much about the role of government in this context. And I mean, you're a big part of this. What can or should governments in the region be doing to accelerate the shifts in the region?
Well, frankly, government should just do what it's good at, and businesses have to do what they're good at. So what we are probably better at, or we are charged to do, is to provide the basic infrastructure, whether it's in terms of education, whether it's in terms of healthcare and all that. But I think what governments, at least we in Singapore, are trying to figure out is to realize that we don't have all the answers, even when it comes to the traditional domains, education, healthcare, and to seek out partners in the private sector who are way more innovative, who are able to scale up in technology, to be able to implement some of what our responsibilities are, work together at scale. And I think the examples of whether it's HaloDoc, the examples of Ruang Guru, right? In terms of Ruang Guru is an ed tech startup, basically in all the rural schools in Indonesia, and it's amazing how if you actually have that partnership, actually you can dramatically transform the lives of people at scale. And that's what governments like Singapore also have to figure out, because it is not a natural instinct to work hand in hand with businesses to solve some of these problems.
Agreed, completely. And we're getting some questions in the app as well. So please put in the questions. We're going to switch to questions in about 5 or 10 minutes. But Ambassador Mihalik, now based on what Cindy said and Kaif said, U.S. ASEAN Business Council is a connector between East and West. And there's a different relationship now between East and West. You guys are also one of the biggest lobbies to the governments. So how do you see, you work with the governments, you work with the big MNCs, how do you see the role of US ABC shifting in this context?
Well, I'm not sure I see it shifting at all, but I have to say that after listening to what Cindy was saying and Kaif was saying, I said, oh my God, they're going to talk to me next, because we are the logical connector between those two groups, between the government and the private sector. There's got to be somebody that puts it all together, and that's one of the things that we try to do. And we try to build those bridges between the innovators and the regulators. We try to build the bridges between the researchers and those who want to, and the intellectual property managers. We have to have a way in which to build that trust that Cindy is talking about, which I think is critical in all of these things. And the other company that I was thinking of, which kind of exemplifies this, was Tun Yat, who is a consolidator, if you will, of high tech. This guy goes out and finds all of the high-tech agriculture that he can find, whether it's high-tech tractors, or whether it's precision fertilizer or high-tech seeds, and he goes out to his hood, if you will, his region, and sells these to farmers, and does it in such a way that he consolidates all the farmers together, and thus can buy at scale, and thus give people the best prices on these things. And he's got to work with the regulators, because, as you know, agriculture and biotech and fertilizers are some of the most regulated foods and food inputs in the world. And trying to deal with the government to make regulations that protect the people and yet are business friendly is a really tough job. And that's one of the things that we do by trying to bring together the private sector, bring together the government to foster win-win situations. And I think, again, that's why with the innovation that is happening out here, and when I was speaking earlier, companies are looking for that innovation because it complements their own R&D. And they would just as soon, as Kaif was saying, they'll go out and spend $100 million or something like that to buy a company and give that company the freedom that it needs to operate, and also give that company the access to the expertise to work with the government. So you get not only the edge not only gets connected better to the center by its innovation, but it's also connected to the kind of expertise, the kind of lobbying expertise that a larger company usually can have, because they work with companies like us. They work with companies like us that are connectors, companies like Deloitte, which is another connector. And EDB is another example, actually, of a connector. Because one of the unique things about Singapore, I think, is its companies like EDB, which are sort of connected to the government, but not really. So they can avoid a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the negative aspects of working with a huge government. And yet they have the connections to be able to make those kind of connectors. So we use EDB. We work with EDB all the time to try to make sure that we can do these connections. So you need a good middle person. You need somebody who has worked with the private sector, who's worked with the government, and that's what connectors like ourselves do.
Maybe let me jump in here, if you don't mind. Yeah, I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. It's not going to be so easy to enter a market that you don't know, and in the developing market as well. And there are lots of regulations and different barriers that you have to cross, you have to get over. But and I think that's why we always encourage companies to always put a foothold in the ground and to have people on the ground operationally, building relationships and networks, because a lot of these markets require some degree of connectedness.
Absolutely.
But that's also where the opportunity is, right? Because the harder it is to get through, and the minute you get through, you have a much longer runway and longer term relationship. And I think we have many examples of companies doing well, spending, but they have to spend their time in this region.
Yeah. And Kai Fong, just to amplify that, Singapore has prided itself as a very effective hub for the region. And, through COVID, there's all this rhetoric about, are we going to work from home indefinitely? I don't believe that's going to be true. I think we're going to work differently, but not completely from home. We will get back to stuff. And the same is true of, there's talk of, can businesses from around the world just run themselves from wherever they are and do it all virtually? That's simply not going to be possible. So will Singapore continue as a hub? I think absolutely. It may be done slightly differently, but you're so right that you cannot engage in business here and seek to scale without being on the ground and being here to experience and build relationships, my view.
And to see it differently, given what we just showcased, there's so much more to see. We're getting a couple of questions here which are related. One is, what is Singapore's continued role in the region, in Southeast Asia? We always started in Singapore. And the second is, what is its role in the geopolitics broadly between US and China? So open to any of you to take this on and start off on the discussion. Political, both of them.
Guys, you got to start it.
Oh, you want me to do it? Yeah, sure.
I mean, they're talking about Singapore.
Well, we are not a big market, 5-6 million people. So clearly, you don't come to Singapore for Singapore. But we like to position ourselves, hopefully, as a place, and this is from evidence. What companies traditionally use us for? As one, they use us for financial services and being a treasury, because here, we have quite a good ecosystem of banking and financial services. So many companies and even unicorns in this region, they tend to incorporate in Singapore. Also because there's trust in the rule of law, and there's IP protection, data protection. So it's a system or legal system in which you can trust, right? If you sign a lease for 30 years, you get 30 years. You can trust that things will be arbitrated properly. And so we are like that base. We are also a base for some categories of talent. I wouldn't say we are a base for all talent, because really, if you're running operations, there's nothing like being on the ground in the market. But we are hosts to many data science teams, many engineering teams, even design teams. So Singapore is like a place where they can amalgate and combine all the different because you need a base to sort of launch your operations from, and you need the base where, as I mentioned, right, there are a lot more commonalities across these diverse markets, but there are some things that you can't run away from being in the market. So there's a nice complementary role that Singapore can play. As for US and China, I think we, as the Prime Minister has said this before, we want to be friends with both, and we consistently are able to be friends with both. So we have actually, look at the flow and the stock of investments. The US remains our largest investor here by far, simply because I think many American companies are a lot more global in their mindsets, and they see Southeast Asia as a place for growth, the next frontier. But we are also seeing a number of Chinese companies, not just the digital giants, which everyone's talking about, but really just a host of different Chinese companies, even in pharmaceuticals, even in logistics and all that. They look at Singapore because they see Singapore as a base to launch international operations. And I think that's the role that we like to play, being friends with both, at the same time, not acting in the interest of each, whether US or China, but acting in the interest of Singapore. And if we can actually maintain that and be trusted by both parties, be trusted to execute whatever's the rule of law, I think we'll be in a good place.
I think Kaif is. I'm just going to say I think Kaif is right, because I think Singapore is I guess I would say it's an equal opportunity advice giver. I mean, they don't care if you're big or small. If they see something you're doing that they don't like, they'll tell you about it. And having sat in on
you speak from first-hand experience.
I was going to say, having sat in, right? Yes, as ambassador for APEC, one of the things that we used to do is whenever we'd go to an APEC meeting, the first thing we'd do is sit down with our colleagues from the Singapore delegation, and they would tell us which one of our initiatives was going to go and which one of our initiatives would flop because we didn't approach it properly. But having said that, I think that Singapore is a great hub, and we have over 160 members in the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, and every one of them has an office in Singapore. We have 7 offices throughout ASEAN, but the one that everyone is sitting in is Singapore for sure.
Yep.
And it is, as I was mentioning earlier, there is a lot of innovation that's going on in Singapore, and Singapore has made it its job not only to manage its own diversity in a way that tries to manage a win-win situation for all the people living in Singapore, but it also does the same in sort of what you'd call, I guess, an omnidirectional foreign policy. It's kind of funny, people used to say that, oh yeah, we want to be friends with everyone, and you think, oh yeah, right, Well, believe it or not, Southeast Asian countries are not bad at doing exactly that. It's a tricky dance.
And I think Southeast Asia is going to have to take on that role, right? They are in between China and Japan. And Cindy, actually, you are in the midst of it all, because as part of your mandate, you also, as Asia Pacific, you have China, Japan, and Southeast Asia, right? So in the geopolitical.
The only thing I'll add to what Michael and Kai Fong are saying is that I do think Singapore bats above its weight in the region. Singapore is highly respected, and they certainly are not the only economy that's trying to walk this line, having spent 10 years in Australia before coming here. I mean, Australia's biggest trading partner, China, but their biggest, ally militarily and otherwise being the U.S. Japan, similar dynamic. The multinationals in Japan highly dependent on China. South Korea, you can go on and on. I think Singapore probably does it in one of the most diplomatic ways, but they're going to find a lot of friends in the region that will respect Singapore and look to walk a similar line. I also, just last comment, do think that Singapore will benefit to some extent from the unsettled situation in Hong Kong.
Well, but one of the other things I think that's essential is the fact that Singapore works very hard at making sure that the private sector and the government talk often. I mean, some of the best internet regulations that we found had their start in Singapore and continue. Some of the cross-border data flow regulations that we're seeing springing up in different ways all over the region are not happening in Singapore. Singapore is one of the ones that is being careful to try to make sure that borders remain open, that data can flow, and maintaining a very business-friendly internet atmosphere. And that's going to be key within Southeast Asia for everybody going forward. I think everyone is starting to realize this, but they're coming a little bit late, and there's a lot of regulation out there that does need to have some adjustment on the internet.
No, if I can just jump in here, I just wanted to caution. I think Singapore only, we are very conscious that we can only thrive if our neighbors thrive, because again, we are 5 to 6 million people, and if we are in a different place where it's not as vibrant and not as fast moving, I think we'll be in a completely different place, and we might not even have this conversation. But we're very fortunate to be in ASEAN, and I think we see ourselves as just jumping on to a platform that's growing and being that platform where we can connect various people together. So, very grateful for people like Cindy and Ambassador who chose to put themselves and their offices here. But I'll be really worried if all their people here don't travel outside of Singapore. And,
Absolutely.
And I think it's that interaction of people in Singapore with people in the region. The fact that actually almost every big conglomerate in Southeast Asia would have some sort of presence here, and there'll be regular interactions between the big and small businesses around this region. That is part of our secret sauce. Yeah.
Correct. Thank you for saying that. I was actually going to anchor that as well to say that the reason EDB wanted to do this was to really reinforce that they are the champions for Southeast Asia. This is not a Singapore only story. This is not a Singapore first story either. That they are the champions for Southeast Asia, and they want to showcase that. And that's also why all three of these entities came together. Because all of us.
It's not a zero sum. So if you guys if anyone on this webinar wants a connection to, let's say, a counterpart in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and all that, we gladly do so. Frankly, because we know that if everyone prospers, we prosper.
Yep, very much so. So we got about 3 minutes left. I want to get final thoughts from everyone and then do a closing to remind people to stay connected. If I can have a quick final thought from you, Ambassador Michalik.
Well, I just think that this is one of the most vibrant areas of the world. Being here is more than half of the job. We help American companies. We like to help ASEAN companies as well be here and become the most vibrant and successful companies that they can. So we look forward to working with Southeast Asia going forward, and especially with people like Deloitte and like EDB as partners.
Excellent. Cindy?
I would just encourage everybody. If the last decade was about, the growth in Asia and rise of Asia, I think the next decade's going to see that accelerate. And so come to Asia with an open mind. The opportunities are tremendous, and look at the edges to find things that you might take home to make your corporation or your core better or stronger.
Cool. I'll just say, look through the cards, see what picks your fancy, and maybe pick a country to go to and just go deep and do the stuff that locals do. And I think that's the best way to figure out for yourselves whether what we tell you is true.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me close off with a few comments here. What you heard from our three leaders from organizations who are very, very passionate about the region. They're strong advocates for the region. They came together at the beginning, all these entities, to say that we got to showcase this region differently and to break the stereotypes. There's so much more going on here. So like Kai said, like Cindy said, like Ambassador Michalik said, please do visit, please come see it, but come with an open mind. Don't come just to sell to the region, but also see what you can learn from the region. There's going to be a lot emerging from here that can go back to the rest of the world. To explore these topics further, what we're launching today is just the beginning. We want to do a lot more. We want to run webinars, podcasts. We want to showcase, if you're doing anything on the edge, we would welcome you to contact us. I don't have a way of pulling back that slide, but the email to contact, we have one mailbox, Deloitte Southeast Asia at Deloitte.com. Write to that. I'll make sure it gets to all three of our entities and we respond to it. And you can have the backing of these three institutions to help you grow in the region. EDB has set up a microsite. It's go.gov.sg.edges of SEA, but I would say Google Edges of Southeast Asia and you'll get to it. Please do stay in touch. We are all strong supporters. We believe in this region. We're big champions of the region, as you are, because you're here. And thank you for joining us. Welcome to Edges of Southeast Asia, and very much looking forward to the next few decades here.